like DM chat, just discussing, general role-playing topics. Good player habits is something that we wanted to talk about this evening as well, like believability of the world, and comparing the sort of like the good, the bad, and the ugly of different role-playing systems and different editions, specifically of Dungeons and Dragons. We're playing 5th edition at the moment, and I wanted to get Jeff's and your thoughts on this edition and some of the previous editions of D&D. So something quite interesting we were talking about, I think just before the stream started actually, was Jeff started talking about like the concept of Jungian archetypes. This is going back to like characters' story arcs, like the hero's journey, if you're familiar with that. And in like a D&D campaign, like where your character starts, like their character background, where they start at level 1 and where they eventually.
I think you're dying there, Gus. Hold on one sec.
4G all the way.
Yeah, you broke down there for a moment.
Where did it?
You were talking about Jungian archetypes, and
like
then,
every Saturday, man. Like, yes. So you were talking about before the stream. You were talking about the dragon and the concept of the dragon and the dragon's treasure. So maybe we should revisit that and then start from there, because I think that's a really interesting point in terms of like a character's development, a character's arc.
Sure. Why were we talking about that, first of all? Let's just go back there.
Because we were talking about your character. We were talking about Breaker, your character from the campaign. And then we started talking about the dragon as the enemy, like the dark reflection, right? So if you've got a nemesis, like one of the ultimate nemesis is actually yourself, right? Is that what you were saying before? And it's like, yeah. So
yeah, it's like your worst enemy is yourself. And so that metaphor has been popularized in some movies and fiction and stuff like that, where like a doppelganger comes out and you fight him, and the hero and the villain or the copy are kind of equally matched. And or also like in Scott Pilgrim it is Nega Scott, and yeah, it's quite a popular thing because it builds onto the hero's journey of fighting in the fighting the dragon to get its gold. And it's almost like a one-up in a way, because it's you. It's not just this other alien being. It's something that knows you deeply. Yeah, so that's why it's quite an attractive fight, or interesting crisis to.
And you were saying about gold as well. So gold,
yeah.
Like the concept of gold is like, you were saying it's a way of advancing yourself, right? Like that's your.
So the gold is a metaphor for usually like knowledge or experience or something like that. It's what the hero seeks, but it's there's more to it. Like getting the gold it's all about the journey, and that grows you as the hero. And often in that plot, it's like the hero needs to die in some sort of way or give up something, and when they go into the dragon's lair, and then they attain the elixir of life or something like that, and that brings them back to life. Which is quite popular. You see like the main hero die at the end, and then someone cries over their body, and then they come back to life because of some sort of supernatural thing. And that's a really powerful metaphor. Also, like, you can bring that back to religious studies, Christ and stuff like that coming back, and that's quite powerful because it actually represents that once you gain this knowledge or experience, who you were before that is dead. If you can think about it, because the knowledge will transform the way you act in the world. So you are essentially a different person because you've learned something, which is quite fascinating. And if you were to go into the metaphor and say like, okay, cool, the hero got the gold, then they aren't that poor person anymore. They are someone with a lot of gold. So in a way, they would change how they acted in the world.
So in a very real sense, your hero has changed. Their whole station, their position, everything in the world has changed. But in a metaphorical sense, they've changed too, right? So it's both like you could take it like at face value as a literal thing. I've got more gold, therefore I am a different station, a different person. But like metaphorically, that process of the journey has changed you anyway. So like the thing that I find really, really interesting is the going back. Like if you remember back to Lord of the Rings, they go and they destroy the One Ring, and they go back to the Shire afterwards, but they realize that they can never go back. Like that's something that I'm super interested in. So to follow on from what you just said, you go and you fight the dragon, you fight your dark shadow, your dark reflection, you get the gold, you're changed in a literal sense and a metaphorical sense, but then how can you ever go back to the world that you were from before? Like, as a hero, part of that arc is, can you actually go back? It's a big question mark, right? Can you actually ever go back?
Like Luke Skywalker could never go back to Tatooine ever, mainly because his uncle and aunt are dead. But like it just wouldn't make sense.
Part of Star Wars. Jesus.
Uncle and skeletons. Uncle.
Yeah, exactly.
The stormtroopers finally hit the first and only time.
Yeah, exactly. The fatal laser bolt of like all 7 films that actually hits from a stormtrooper. But yeah, it's like
they only hit off screen. They only hit off screen.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't see the hits. It's like
it's like behind the DM screen.
Like the Schrodinger's cat, like stormtrooper cat. It's like only hits when you don't see it. But yeah, no, it's like a super interesting concept, right? Because like if you go back to your character, Breaker, so your character's a tiefling. So within the world of Omnia, the campaign setting, they're incredibly rare, right? So they're super rare as it is. So they're kind of an outcast race of individuals. And then why don't you fill us in his background? Because what happened from there? So he grew up like outcast anyway, right?
Yeah, I didn't actually realize he was so rare, because I also didn't really mean to play as like a snowflakey kind of character. You know what I mean? I didn't want to try to find this weird like vegan hipster equivalent in the world. but so okay, I'll just start from the beginning. Like I every time I played D&D, or at least recently, I wanted to try something new, because when I was younger, I always wanted to play. I enjoyed the rogue, and I played a wizard a couple times, and I enjoyed the character with lots of tricks or solutions to problems. Like it's really fun to have like a bag of tricks to get around things. And one of my more recent characters was a cleric, and I really enjoyed that because it's like a nice combination of being able to fight a bit and have some tricks to get around things. But and then after that, I played a sorcerer, which was pretty fun. But then I thought, I actually just want to play something simple, like a barbarian. I've never played a barbarian. This class exists. I don't want to have to keep going back to those other ones, because I did enjoy them, but I want to learn something from the system. And I wouldn't think I was someone who would play a goon, especially coming from someone like a player that likes to have options. And so I knew I wanted to play barbarian. Then I think the tiefling part came next. I did like the outcast look or feel, so barbarian tiefling kind of made sense, like someone who's like living on the verge of society in some sort of way, or no one likes them, or like, yeah, so they'd kind of been forced into this position. I don't know how tieflings are regarded in like the standard D&D world, but I guess they are some form of infernal, so who would really want to be friends with them, I guess.
Yeah, it's just Forgotten Realms is the default setting now, right? So I'm not sure how tieflings are regarded in Forgotten Realms, actually. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's probably quite a cosmopolitan setting, right? That tends to be the direction things are going, so probably okay.
Actually, in the new Baldur's Gate, I think you can play as a tiefling, like you can make one up there. So yeah, so I guess maybe like we got that old school prejudice of damn demons. There goes the neighborhood. But so I had that in mind. Like I wanted to play this outcast character, and I was trying to think of who do I know like that, because I find it quite important to. You need like a cornerstone for a character, something from a movie, something like that, to kind of just give you a nudge or feel where to go with it. And for me, it was Marv from the Sin City movie and graphic novels. Like I really loved his like will to fight, and I loved the idea that he was like willing to risk everything for something he believed in and take down the the structure, bring down the man. It was all just to go into a blaze of glory. Like, and that sort of summed up nicely, like the Barbarian for me. Because the way the Barbarian's written, it's more someone who's chosen to leave society and live in nature as an outcast. Well, not as an outcast, but like they've rejected society, and that's how they choose to live. And that's how all sounds good. But I also like to put my own spin on it. And here, I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, one sec. I think I forgot to put the audio on this other screen. So let me just change to it and see if it works. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry, I just made these screens today, so I forgot to put the audio capture on the scene. So basically, we went broadcasting audio there for a minute. Okay, that's my mail. Don't worry about that. Yeah, so yeah, Marv is just. I like that he's got these flaws, that he's also ugly.
And so you're talking about picking like a film character or comic book character, like some character, pre-existing character is like your starting block, right? Like your initial point of.
Yeah, because even if you try and act this character, you will never get it right. You still have your own frame of reference. Like I still have like my own life experience, and I might try and merge him with another character, but at least something to like work with. Like when we first started playing, I was definitely thinking about him and how he would solve problems, and just trying to act that out. And like now I'm starting to find who Breaker is a lot more. But yeah, I definitely recommend just having a starting block. Otherwise, you don't know you can't compare him to anything or your character, so you don't know what he is and isn't, pushy or whatever. So yeah, having like a place to start with, like there shouldn't be any shame in that. Just copy until you can figure it out yourself.
That's super interesting though, right? Because it's like whenever you start with the thing, whatever it is, whether you're learning a skill, in this case a character, starting with the frame of reference is at least for me as well. Like I find it very helpful. Like if you're learning miniature painting, right? You start by learning like the A to B to C, right? You start with like a linear process, and then over time you'll develop your own style. You'll use that as a springboard to build off, right? So you're kind of using this as a starting point for your character. This is the springboard. Here's the starting block. Let's work from this.
Exactly, and it's so simple. Like I can see what his mode is, and he captures like the elements quite well that I want to portray with the Barbarian. So yeah, he's definitely where I want to start from. But like our causes aren't the same. So Mars was trying to avenge this girl that this lady that showed him a kindness of like sleeping with him, which he was never able to do. Breaker doesn't quite have that. His background is that he was and maybe this is something I actually would like to work on a bit more, because I'm worried about the term murder hobo, which you might be very familiar with. But yeah, essentially like the system of oppression that is found in Omnia, which is similar to ancient Roman, where like having slave class and like a ruling overclass, has pretty much pushed Breaker like into slavery since he was a child and removed from his parents. Like you said, like these tieflings are quite rare and not really regarded quite well. So no one's going to care about the people, the undesirables, being shackled up, which is like what I liked about him. Like he really has a place. Like pretty much since he was born, the Dominion have had their foot on his neck. And so the only way to get out from underneath that foot was to go underground. And yeah, so I think that's like a pretty cool exploration. So yeah, these backgrounds are kind of different, but the drive is similar.
Yeah, and then in terms of your just speaking a little bit out of the actual character at the moment, in terms of the way that you play your character, so you've used this like character from a comic book or from a film, or whatever, in this case Marv, right? So you've used him, okay, as your building block, like your starting point. Would you use that character for the way that you play him as well, in terms of like your mannerisms, and just the way that you would Breaker would make decisions in the world, so the way that you as a player would play the character?
So far, that hasn't quite happened. Like I found that Breaker ends up being a lot more like coarse and short and kind of an asshole. Where Marv had a bit of charm, but maybe we didn't see Marv interact with the same people in the same way or similar kind of characters. So it just kind of ends up taking a life of its own. But this is this is just the starting point. So yeah, I don't think I ended up playing him like Marv, but similar guy.
So then in terms of you're a tiefling in the world of Omnia, right? So again, super rare race. They came about in the world through magic, and magic is a scorned and shunned force. So automatically if you're playing a tiefling, that puts you on the back foot. So you went with a barbarian, but you didn't go with the typical barbarian, right? You went with a bit of a different take on it.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I came up with it is I'll show you now. So there are these people in Cape Town that I've seen. I don't know their full story, but they're called the Sackcloth People. And they basically like these herbalists kind of guys who sell, where's the stuff? They sell like, different herbs and stuff that they collect, but they wear like burlap clothes, like basically like a sack, like these kind of Rasta type people.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting. And then I saw this other homeless person who, sorry, these guys kind of remind me of a druid, right? If you think about them, like a modern day druid.
Yeah.
But then I saw somebody, like another homeless person, who's a bit crazy. I don't want to go too much into his detail, but he only wears black bags as clothes. So he's like got his arms through like the bag. He wears it as a skirt. And that's all I've ever seen him wear. And I've seen him around for like the last 6-8 years, something like that. And in my mind, it felt like he was an urban version of this druid. It's like, well, and then like that sparked like all these questions, like what does an urban druid look like? And then made me wonder about an urban barbarian, because I also had heard about an urban rangers, which sound a lot like a detective. And so I was wondering, like, what does an urban barbarian look like? And so, that's where I was kind of expanding on him, being like a street urchin or someone who was living in slavery and just kind of living between the streets, trying to survive in rejected society.
So this is kind of interesting, right? So you picked kind of like an archetypal type of character from a comic book, and you've used real life inspiration, right? And you've kind of fused the two together and gone, okay, here's some observations from my life that I'm using to kind of build this character. But then I suppose two questions jump into my mind on that is that from a rules perspective, because we're playing a game, right? So we're playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. From a rule perspective, do you not feel pigeonholed by the fact that Barbarian has got, like, you have to pick a subclass, right? You have to do that thing. So that's the first question. I was like, do you feel pigeonholed by that, or are you happy with that side of things? And I suppose
have to pick a subclass.
Yeah, because in the class advancement, right, in Barbarian, you had to pick. Was it the Totem Warrior, right?
Yeah. You either had to get better at rage or like a nature type thing. I can't remember what it was exactly. Yeah, I did. I did feel a bit pigeonholed, but it actually, the one I was forced into was actually what he would have taken.
Okay.
Anyway, so it wouldn't be too bad. Because also,
So in your case, it wasn't too bad.
No, I also because I wouldn't like to have been in a position where I had to doctor all these rules either. I kind of want to, like, rules are there to just like supplement the story that we're interacting with. So if I had to start like looking too many things up and working on the fly, I wouldn't have had fun anyway. So it suited me quite well which way he went.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. You don't want to chafe up against the system, right? Like in terms of the rule system. And like, I very much agree with you in terms of, and this is not for everybody, right? This is just like you and I, and people have got different opinions. But I think in terms of the way that you and I see the rules is that the rules are very much a way just to facilitate storytelling, right? Like that's the purpose, is that they're there as a framework to help you role play. But I mean, some people maybe play role playing games like war games. That's fine. Whatever floats your boat. So I suppose with your character then, so you've got these building blocks, right? You've picked a character from a fictional work, and you've got like real life references. So then you've done that. So you're building your character. So what's the next in the thought process?
Sure. I can't tell you what the next step would be. I think I just gathered a lot of different influences. Another one was Tom Waits, because I think maybe the next step is like, how do I portray this character? Like, how do I actually bring him alive? And I really loved how Tom Waits carries himself. He's sort of this, he's a musician, and he has like this sort of like drunk swagger, but sad, beautiful kind of energy about him, which I don't think I've quite worked through yet with Breaker, but like definitely I would like to have something like that. So in the last session that we played, you could see a bit of Breaker's sort of fun side. So I didn't want to make him just a murder hobo who hates everything. He's also someone who just wants to enjoy the now in some ways. So that's why he does drink and party a bit hard, and similar to Tom Waits in that kind of way. And he does have a deep voice, Tom Waits and Breaker. So what ends up happening is on days that we are role playing, I end up doing a lot of vocal exercises to try bring my voice down a bit, to try access that.
Yeah, I mean, you did a good job with that. I think in the last session, I thought like it was really good from a vocal point of view, right? And I think that helps, especially from like if somebody's listening, like a podcast version of of the stream or whatever. So you picked all these like points as inspirations for your character. So then this all goes into formulating like who your character is and how you portray them, right?
Yeah, I think then after that, what I end up doing is a lot of like simulations in my head. I think about how he would do something in this situation or that situation. Like something I was thinking about when running the other day was I love like interpersonal drama. So between characters, like I think that's quite interesting because it also it gives us like I'm hoping like an inside joke or inside like hook to one another. And I was thinking about a way to have a hook with Huey, yeah.
Yep.
And well, what that looked like was like him basically like bullying Yui in some way, like pushing him against the wall. But so Breaker has a lot of artifacts that he's like pocketed over the other adventures. And I know there's one orb that he has in his pocket, gold, like a brass or golden orb with runes on it. And Breaker is illiterate, which actually is something I added onto it because I thought it would make a cool flaw in a way.
Yeah.
Like I know third ed barbarians were illiterate. I'm not too sure about fifth ed, but I don't think they are. But I quite liked it.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I agree. I think that's really cool.
And also it, in a way, gives other characters power over Breaker because I like having these weak points that other players can exploit, but part of it is making it known. So like Breaker could easily overpower Elias, but then Breaker, one of the episodes, wanted to do something, wanted to like have a letter written, and then Elias completely just wrote a totally different thing. So he completely had one up on Breaker, which I think is great. Like it's a nice back and forth between the two characters. But so Breaker can't read the etching on this orb, and I think he would want if he saw Yui is like a magic caster. So I think Breaker would probably want to corner him and tell him he better better decipher it or figure out what it is, so that he can know if Yui's worth trusting or not. Because he doesn't want to go out into battle risking his skin for somebody who's not worth a damn. So he better start showing that he's worth something.
So just for context, I suppose, I mean, Yui is a warlock, human warlock in our campaign, right? And Breaker. So the background is Breaker and Elias have been together for quite a while, and we've got two new characters on the scene. Literally, we've had 2 sessions together. We've got Yui and Adair, so a warlock and a druid. So they've like recently met. They met under harsh conditions. So like Breaker and Elias are still very much getting to know Yui and Adair, right?
Yeah.
So I suppose in terms of Breaker's character, then, so like, because this is something I find very interesting. You went for just that different take on the barbarian, right? Like that urban barbarian. I think that's really, really interesting. And something that frustrates me a little bit about D&D. Again, going back to the rules, right? But like the rules facilitating those things, and I think that it's really important from like a DM's point of view to be able to be very free form if you want to be. Like if the player is like, well, hang on a second, this doesn't really fit, like the kind of character that I'm playing. I think it's very important from a DM perspective that they're like just to be very, very open to any new ideas of players. Like, hey, this doesn't fit. Can we try X and Y and Z? You know what I mean?
Because I like to also think about things in like sort of abstractions. So like, what is a barbarian? Like I said, it's like someone who is either been outcast from society or rejected, and the rules say that they are like a nature being. So but you can work with that. Like, where else would you find like an outcast? And like, in what society? Like, what is nature? Why does it have to be like forest and trees with like fawns running around? Well, what is like an Eskimo kind of barbarian look like? But there's like, so you can understand like the core of what the class needs to be, but you should be able to put your own flavor onto it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose in terms of, something like, I suppose you kind of alluded to, so in terms of your character's cooperation with other characters and having those dramatic moments, I also agree that that's very important, right? Because I like everything's built off those dramatic moments. Like, you get to know more about your character and they get to know more about their character in the dramatic moment, right? And I think that that's really useful. And like, that's, again, it's like a springboard for finding out more about your character. But alongside that ties very much into player habits, right? So there's like ways to go about doing that, which is fine, and then there's ways to not go about doing that. Do you know what I mean? Like from player to player, like you got these two layers. You got the player layer and the character layer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like it's quite important to manage that player layer. So the way that the players interact with each other. So like I suppose it kind of segues into like good player habits. Like what are the things that you would, if you were DMing or just playing, doesn't really matter, I suppose. What are the kind of habits that you would try and foster as a player to build that relationship so you could have those dramatic moments?
Sure. I think for me, it's about like letting go of the game aspect of it. Because I think some people come into it thinking they're playing like a board game or like there's a win or whatever, but it's actually all about the fun part of it. Like, and what is fun for you? Maybe everyone's idea of fun might be different. Like some people do want to just get the big swords and just get the big numbers items, and so if that's your fun thing, then that's cool. But for me, it's definitely about having the role playing aspect of it, and like having to like finding those moments and facilitating them. But you can't do that when you're in combat all the time or you want to go fight and hunt things down. You need to push your players into like an uncomfortable position. And if you can get them to do that with one another, that's also quite interesting, like how they overcome that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, your players, I think, need to trust each other, which is something that just takes time and patience, because it can be quite nerve-wracking being put on the spot and having to like come up with a solution for something else that like is out of your experience in some ways, like to separate yourself from who you are, from your character.
Yeah, that's a super important point. I mean, it seems like a lot of I don't know if this is true, so tell me if I'm full of shit. Seems like, so I've got a 15-year gap, right, in role playing. So I mean I played D&D with you guys in like 2005. I've had a 15-year gap and now I'm back in 2020, right? So I've got like these snapshots in time of like the role playing scene. It seems to me that a trend now, and again, caveat, I might be completely talking crap, but it seems to me that people put more of themselves into their characters and they tie themselves more to their characters now, that if like something bad happens to the character, it's actually something bad happening to them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's a real thing. That's just something I'm kind of noticing that like they invest themselves personally in a character in a game.
Yeah, no, that definitely does happen. Like my old DM, my boy said something about like, if you really want to crush a player, take something away from him or her, because people become so invested in like their characters. And like, I remember when I was playing with Dylan in my Ways companion, Dylan lost an attribute point from like we fought against something and it was a permanent drain. Dylan went on this crazy quest. Like we need to get the stat point back. We need to figure out something, and like it was like heartbreaking to him. Like he just couldn't step back from it. But that was him as a player seeing a loss to his character, like his thing in a way.
Having like an ego investment in the character.
Yeah, and rather than just taking the loss and then moving on, you know, because like I don't think to myself, well, actually maybe. So like, okay, well, what would an attribute loss look like to me in real life? Like, okay, maybe I got like a big cut on my face, and so my charisma went down by like a point or two.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so but like, I suppose in some ways it makes sense to kind of like, okay, do I want to go get reconstructive surgery? That turns into a whole big quest.
Yeah,
or you could just take it in some sort of way and like you completely shift how you are as a character.
I suppose having an ego investment is good in a way, right? You want to have some investment in your character, but I think that what I'm getting at is you don't want to take something personally. Like if something happens to your character, you don't want to treat it as it's a personal attack against you as a player, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So I think investing in your character is fine, but don't treat something bad happening to your character as being bad happening to you personally, right? And that's kind of what I'm noticing.
Yeah,
I
think
that's too close.
It also goes the other way. Like if your character does something bad, are you a bad person?
Yeah, that's such a strange thing, right? That's exactly right. So tying yourself too closely to your character, that's the logical conclusion, right?
Or even like your like standards or like society standards on your character, like these are fantasy characters, and like I think it's actually quite cool to act out things that you wouldn't normally do, because you get to explore something about yourself. Like why did you react in such a way? And you can't be too hard about yourself. Like we are just trying to have fun and have a good time. Ultimately, like, that's where we should be trying to get to.
I've noticed that.
I don't know how to unhinge those two things. Like that's not something I'm.
This is an observation. I'm not saying there's any solution to that, but that is something that I've noticed. Like over the course of this 15-year gap, is that coupling between the character and the person is much closer. So, but yeah, I think in terms of going back to the hero's journey. So where in Breaker's context, right? So you've already told us a bit about how you put the character together. What would like a hero's journey look like to Breaker? Like, would he refuse the call to adventure? Would he, and then eventually would he come around to it? Like, would he return after getting his gold from the dragon? Would he try and return, or would he just wander? Like, what's the the different? Just thinking out loud, sort of thing, right?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, I don't know if you've ever written like a script or anything like that before. So like everyone's got their own style of how to get there. Because like with the hero's journey, there's a formula for what all the beats and how the character must succeed, and it's a formula that is worked. Like most movies follow it in some sort of way, and because it's really appealing to us. Like the idea of watching someone else learn something or figure something out also satisfies us, because we love hearing about how problems are solved, because that'll give me a solution for a problem that you might have had and you've shared a story with me. So when I write something like that, I try to think of like the start and the end point at the same time when making a character, and then everything else is just kind of the steps to get there. Because what's nice about doing that is that you have your resolve, like everything can tie in nicely. Like if you think about what is your beginning and what is your end, like those things, they need to kind of balance out in some sort of way. So like the rags to riches story is like a nice summary of like, we have a poor character who becomes rich, and that's your beginning and end. So how they got there doesn't quite matter. Like that's just sort of the steps. So for me, Breaker's ending, I would really like it if he was someone who could, I guess, sacrifice himself to crippling the structure, like breaking something like important, like causing like a big event that might have toppled society as we know it in some sort of way. I think because being this tiefling, he's probably experienced a lot of like othering, like just the way the other two characters treat him. They're like, we can't trust this guy, we don't like him, and so he's had that his whole life. So like being born into society where the chips are against you, like fuck that. So Breaker would really love to destroy that in any kind of way. And I think also just that kind of talking has caused him to like hate himself in some sort of ways too. And he feels he doesn't belong in modern society. He isn't welcome in, he's like left behind from infernal society. So he absolutely has no place to go. And he's just got this burning hatred inside of him. So for him to, if he could exact that on society at large, he would.
So interesting question from this. So I'm going to bring up the alignment question, right? I know this is a point of contention because there's all sorts of arguments about alignment. So, but your character's alignment, you picked chaotic neutral, right?
Yeah.
So when you, at what point would you pick something like that? Or I suppose, I mean, it's mutable, right? You could change it, but was it a conscious decision to pick chaotic neutral in light of knowing the beginning and the end of your journey? Or was it like before and then you decided the beginning and end? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something I just filled in after. So it's not something I thought about before. But it makes sense. So it's like, are they a law-abiding citizen? Definitely no. So that would make them chaotic. Then there's the good and evil axis. Like I don't want to play an evil character when everyone else is being good because I don't know, just it's like unnecessary. Right? Yeah, it's just not appropriate. Like he wouldn't be there then. He would just be in someone else's campaign.
Exactly.
Then it doesn't make sense for him to be good either, if that's his attitude. So so the neutral is the only way to go. But what I do like is his relationship with Elias, who is chaotic good. So Breaker will literally he will take out the guards. Like if there's guards like slavers with a bunch of slaves, Breaker would kill the slavers because he hates them. But to him, the slaves, if they're weak enough to get caught, then they deserve to be in chains. Because he was in chains and no one saved him. He had to break out of himself. So honestly, he doesn't give a shit about that part. But with Elias is about saving the people and might not have the means to get to them. So that's why I really love the relationship between them. Because that way we can ultimately I'm playing as a good character because I'm with Elias. Like the party is good, and I like it for that reason. We could always appeal to the greater good or the best in situations. But Breaker himself, if Breaker is by himself, it won't necessarily go that way.
So going back to the question about the players facilitating those dramatic moments and so you think that a good player habit is letting things go, right? So just not being so invested in having a particular outcome or having things go a particular way, or like if something bad happens to your character, as long as it facilitates drama. So that's kind of what you're getting at with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like even if you didn't roll good stats or anything like that in the beginning, like don't hold on too tightly to them. Like everything can change. You can still roll well. You can still get some of the outcome, but don't get too emotional about the way things go.
Yeah, too bent out of shape, right? It's interesting, like when I look back at, so I got out my 3.5 monster manual just to have a read, and I'm like, I haven't really read this book in 15 years, right? Properly.
Yeah.
Fucking focusing, but anyway, the 3.5 monster manual, and I'm comparing that to 5th edition, and the harshness of the system, it's so much harsher. Like I was looking at basilisks, right? And basilisks in 3.5, it's just roll a save or you get turned to stone. Fuck you. That's it. Whereas in 5th It's like roll one save, and then you get another chance at it, and then you can do this and that. And this is like 3.5 is like, no, fuck you. You decided to fight a basilisk, you're done. You know what I mean? You fail that save, you're screwed. So it's like the harshness of the system is very like used to be much harsher than it is now, and that kind of ties in with that. Like if you're very invested in your character, like, and you go back and you play like original first edition D&D, I think you'll like people will get very upset like very quickly, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you play modern RPGs versus if we played Adam or NetHack or those old ones. Like they don't give a shit about you. You can just go die, and that's that. You just
you sink hours and hours into the game, and you fucking get stabbed in the eyeball by a goblin. You're like, no, I was wasted 6 hours of my time.
Yeah, I think it speaks to where everyone's at, like the sort of zeitgeist of like role playing right now. I think everyone wants something that's more cinematic, easier to get into, easier to get out of. Like, because you and I have jobs, we have like lives and partners and stuff like that we need to kind of attend to. So if my character dies and I have to roll a new one, I might not have as much fun, but like with that, it does streamline a bunch of things. Like I do appreciate it for that. So we can, like I said earlier, we can the rules are there just there to facilitate the story in some sort of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like there's a lot of things I do like about 5th edition. Like I really, really like how they've incorporated the whole background process, like the bonds and flaws, and that aspect into character creation. I think that's really good, really positive. Yeah, and there's a bunch of other things that I do like about it as well. There's some things I don't like about it. There's some things I like about 3.5 more, but that's mainly from a DM's perspective more than a player's perspective. As a player, I would like 5th edition more. As a DM, I like a lot of the things from 3.5 because it gives me as a DM more tools to make better adventures when it comes to like monsters and stuff like that. So I think it just depends on your perspective, right?
Sure. Yeah, I actually don't have any perspective on what it's like as a DM. So that's interesting to know.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, good example is things like going back to the monster manual, right? So if you look at, they've cut a bunch of stuff out in 5th edition. So things like where you would find a monster, like where do these things live? Like what sort of environment do you find them in? What organization are they solitary? Do they come in pairs? Are they?
Is this thirded?
Yeah, this is all in the thirded 3.5 monster manual, but it's not in the 5th edition monster manual.
Really?
So things like that, even a description of the monster, like in the 3.5, it gives you a nice block at the start that you can read to your players to describe this creature that you don't have in 5th edition. So there's all sorts of things like that and how to advance monsters. I don't think I might be wrong on that with 5th edition, but you got that in 3.5. There's also like treasure as well. So they tell you like, does this creature have treasure, or like, is it 50% chance of having like items or coins? Like, they might have nothing. But yeah, so there's all those things like that extra information, which I think is super useful for a DM, which they give you in 3.5, which you don't have in 5th edition. So especially even like a description, right? Like something you can literally open the book and just read it to your players. Like, this is what this thing looks like, which is quite cool.
Yeah. Well, also like just coming back to the basilisk, like that in a way turns into, it seems like an adventure to find out more about this creature. So if you can find out that like it turns you into stone in one round, then you can, find a counter, like something to counter that in some sort of way.
See, I love that, man. I love that. Yeah. That's so cool because that in of itself is its own thing, right? It's like, that monsters are more dangerous in the setting. So it's like, okay, we have to find out about the monster. We got to like go to a library or find somebody who knows something about this creature, find out its weakness, find out like what it can do to you, like how dangerous is this thing before you go into combat. And that's like all the build up to that. You know what I mean? Like it builds up that tension, which I fucking love. I really enjoy stuff like that. So it escalates that tension, that drama before the actual encounter, rather than like draw a sword and just like run in, swing like, which is fine, but I don't know. I think from a storytelling point of view, actually that pre-combat sort of adventure, I think is quite fun. But just because it's more dangerous, it's more lethal. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really good point, right? Is having to like research the monster or find out more about it, like in character. You know what I mean?
So something I would like to see more of is like I had this idea of doing a Stars Without Number campaign where you start off in like on a ship on the run, and like you're in a cargo hold with a bunch of other people, and the crew has been killed, or like the primary crew, and someone runs into the cargo hold and says like, "Can anyone fly a ship?" And then your players step up and try to like get in there. But what I like about that is that you could maybe everyone makes it one character, and then after that, if your character dies, you just quickly roll another one, and another person out of the cargo hold comes out. So you start becoming less and less attached to your characters, and then just try to figure out like, who is this person? How do they interact? Like, and just like this, the way you generate characters and stars of that number is quite cool. It's quite fun, and it's like very emergent.
Very roguelike, I think.
Yeah, it's very roguelike, which I think is quite fun. And I think something like that, or with Call of Cthulhu, you can like really bring down your ego a bit. When your character dies, that you spent lots of time on, it's almost soul crushing to see them go. Because my character died in the last campaign I was part of, and it was morbid. It was absolutely morbid. In fact, before that same character's grandfather, an NPC, died, and we were just like gutted, because we had so much emotional like investment in it. But picking up a character that you just made, that was quick, that you haven't invested or thought too much about, they're just kind of like a cardboard cutout of a few of the little bits and pieces, can be quite fun. Like what is Gus's version of this kind of character look like, and then you get to act it out. Maybe an hour or two, the character dies, and you pick up another one. Like I think
gets sucked into the vacuum of space. Next. But so hang on. So the thing is, though, I don't know, like character death, I think that from a storytelling point of view, can be super fucking epic. And I think that it can make for really good stories afterwards. Like, when you tell like other role players, like, I had this character, this is their journey, and this is how they died in the end. Like, that's a super memorable thing. Like, I know people who keep and frame their character sheets of like characters who died. They're like, because they're like, this character is fucking awesome. The journey's now come to an end. This is a beginning to end journey and story that I've got for this character with this character sheet. Let's frame it and put it up. And every time I look at it, or I can talk about it with like friends and stuff, and like that's its own like block in time. You know what I mean? Like its own sort of thing.
That's quite cool. Yeah, you can always just look back on that.
Yeah. Well, how did your character die? What happened?
It was kind of dumb. I think he was trying to save.
Oh, really?
He was trying to save Dylan's character or something like that, and end up. What did we do? Okay, yeah, there's like a bit of follow, like back up there, but summary is that we needed to raid a wizard city or something. That we were friends with the wizard city, but it basically was like high level magic city. Like everything ran on magic, and we, while doing a quest, we became vilified, and we needed to get something out of this wizard city without anyone knowing that we were there. And we were just getting out, and Dylan's character was being spotted, so my character tried to save him, and we just both got murdered by like the wizard gods.
Ugh.
Yeah,
high level wizard gods.
It got laser beamed to pieces.
Jeez, like it. Damn, that's a was it at least a dramatic moment, or was it just like kind of like ob?
Yeah, it was pretty dramatic. Like I had used up all my spell slots, inspiration point. Everything was just like finished, and I was like, oh, like we've got to make this work, and it just didn't work. Yeah, it was super sad.
Well, no, it's pretty cool, I suppose. At least it's dramatic, right? But like, this is something I was thinking about the other day in terms of like danger rating of a world or a setting, right? So, if a setting is not dangerous, it doesn't make any sense in D&D. So let me explain that. So if there's no real, genuine, super highly dangerous risk to going adventuring, like there's a high chance you're going to fucking die if you pick up a sword and shield and go adventuring, then everybody would be adventurers and everybody would be high level. Because you think about like an underclass in society, people who've got nothing to lose are like, well, fuck it. I can just steal a sword from somebody, fashion a wooden shield, go adventuring, and come back with 3 levels of fighter. Why wouldn't you do that if it's not dangerous? So there has to be like a really solid risk of just getting fucking murdered if you try going adventuring, to like dissuade the average person from doing it. Well, it's like your town guards would be like 20th level fighters.
Yeah.
You know, there would be no dungeons to explore. They'd all be raided. There'd be no monsters. They'd all be killed. Like, so it all stems off like a dangerous world. Like, so the world has to be very, very, very dangerous, or it doesn't make any sense in a D&D context. So like, and it's like trying to reconcile that with not wiping your entire party out when they're like first and second level. But it still has to be dangerous, right? Or else it's got no value. Like gaining levels got no value unless you have a genuine risk of getting killed when you go adventuring as players, right?
That's true. Yeah, that is an interesting challenge, because I mean, you can still almost have a party wipe at like higher levels too. You might misjudge something. You just roll really badly and then make it happen. But yeah,
well, look at what happened to Breaker and Lice, right? When they entered the sewers, they got jumped by those fucking imps. Like as they
Breaker still needs to go back for that. we just skip past that part, but that still needs to happen.
Well, yeah. So enter the sewers underneath the city, the capital city, got jumped by fucking imps, and you guys got badly messed up, right? Like it was quite severe.
Quite bad. I think more for Elias than for Breaker. I guess
Breaker's got meat armor.
I think the solution is you got to kind of beat the players down and keep them in a state where they can't replenish. So then things, because when you're in full HP and you're going venturing, you think everything's going to be fine, and you don't want to just kill your character, like kill them, because then then you can see how hard the world is, but then you've also lost interest. Yeah, exactly. So I think having like a close call is one thing, but then you can always go back to town and be like, okay, cool, well, that was just an encounter, that's fine. But in a state where your resources are diminished and you can't go forward or back, that's when you go, oh my god, this is really hard. We shouldn't have got out of bed today.
Yeah, that actually is an interesting question about resting as well. You know, like in 5th edition D&D, you can do like short rests and long rests.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the temptations to make a world feel more lethal is like you need to rest longer to do stuff. So you can say, okay, well, a long rest is not just a day. It takes you a week to like heal because you've been like fucked up. You've had cuts, burns, you've been stabbed, you've been gouged at, you've been clawed, slashed, glassed in the face. It's like you need like a week to recover. But the problem is if you do that, what happens is your players are less reluctant to go adventuring and they're much more cautious. They're like, well, I don't want to enter that dungeon or I don't want to advance. Let's leave and go back and rest because it takes us a long... You see what I mean? It actually slows the adventure down and stops them from getting into the situation that you just talked about, which is you're confined, you're low on resources, your back is to the wall. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's two types of rest. There's the short rest, which you only get, I think, the number of eight hit dice.
You hit dice, yeah.
To recuperate hit points, and then the long rest just fixes everything. So you were suggesting making the long rest longer?
Yeah, both. So you make short rest and long rest longer, and basically just more difficult to get your hit points back.
Yeah.
So that makes the world feel harsher, but the knock-on effect is that people don't get themselves into the situations where they feel like their back's to the wall. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you could also just do it with that. If the players finish their short rest, like they've used up all their HD for short rests, and they're still not out, then that's like the middle ground, I suppose.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like we have this last little bit to get us out of here. We finished our potions, we finished our spells. What are we going to do? Because we can't sleep here. Without changing the time.
Yeah.
If it does take too long, then it makes it a bit harder to.
Yeah, and it does make people more cautious. So this is the balancing act, right? Is that you're trying to make the world feel genuinely dangerous, and people might die, but it's a balancing act, and you can have all these knock-on effects if you like whatever you alter, right? So one of the things I was thinking about is like, okay, well, let's put a hit point cap in. So let's say your hit points keep going up until level 5 or level 6, and then after that point, you don't get any more hit points. Like your hit points stay as they are. Like that's it. Or maybe they only go up by your constitution bonus. So you don't roll any more dice at all. So your hit points advancement slows down massively. So like as you take on more and more dangerous creatures, you're super killy, but if you get hit, they can like really mess you up. Or an alternative is to introduce a wound system. So it's like you can have as many hit points as you want, but as soon as you take a certain amount of hit points and damage, say like 15 or 30 hit points, it will cause a minor or a major wound. So it doesn't matter if you got 120 hit points and you think you can fight like the super dangerous creatures, they'll still fuck you up because they'll deal major wounds to you because they'll be dealing larger chunks of damage.
Sure. Hang on, I think I'm frozen here.
Yeah, you look frozen to me, but you can still hit. Oh, there we are. That's good. But you know what I mean? So there's like there's different balancing.
So yeah, what you're talking about is changing the rules, which I'm not too big a fan of. I think the flow needs to change in some sort of way. So like something like sorry, wow, am I really blurry? I'm pixelated. What happened?
Yeah, you look a little bit blurry on the Google Hangout.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how to fix that.
No, I think it looks.
Sorry for my blurry face.
Let me check the stream. It should be fine.
Yeah, I'm watching OBS. I look really bad.
Oh yeah, the stream is a little bit blurry. I don't know why.
Okay.
Maybe it's OBS. That's all right.
I had like a little glitch for a moment, and now I'm blur boy.
So instead of changing rules, you want to change flow.
The flow. So we actually need to talk about, or what I think is like a pacing change. So yeah, you go into a dungeon, you come to do the one thing that you need to do, and you find out there's this other thing that can happen, like that's like even better, right? Or like, you know, someone like an authority tells you go into dungeon to resolve something, which you can go do easily, but then you find out there's like something that'll benefit me directly that the players are keen to do, like, and then it's optional. Like, do you want to do the normal thing, or do you want to take a risk and double your money, kind of thing? And in that, usually people want to like either come back later or do it directly. So maybe, and you can use it as like a gauge. Like, was the first encounter to get to the primary objective easy or not? If it was not easy, then they'll leave, and that's fine. So, and then if it was easy, then they'll want to probably pursue it more. Then you start to take away those like rests. Like maybe they might need a rest before going on the second adventure. Like we can do it. And this actually starts tying in with like the hero's journey again. Then you give them an ally, someone who's like living in this place or who can help them. And okay, cool. Like you can give us resources. Sure, that's fine. And then you bring in the enemies, that person's enemies, and then make it harder again. So like the situation keeps escalating. So you've used up their short rests, you've using up their resources, and you still haven't gotten to the thing, but you've also become invested in it.
You're tied in, right?
Yeah, I find that kind of like staggering on like the optional like side quests, because it's like we chose to get on this route when we didn't have to.
Yeah, precisely. That's a massive thing, right? Is player choice. Like you don't have to do this thing, but like that again, that emotional buy-in, like wait, we've chosen to do this thing now, and it's taken us down a certain path, right? I mean, it's kind of like what's happening in our campaign at the moment, right? In terms of like your characters, where they are, and like the tie-ins in terms of the arc. But you mentioned pacing. Now, pacing is super difficult to do, and the reason why. So I think this is a distinct thing, right? So I get what you're saying in terms of the story escalation, and I completely agree. The difficulty is within that is the pacing. So how to pace a story over a number of separate game sessions. So if you think about like the in-world time that's passed in our campaign, it's not much at all. In the real world, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks have gone by, right? So how do we speed up things in game, like incentivize things going faster in game? It's really hard to do because you've got 4 people who have all got their own characters and competing like ideals and ideas and things to do in game. So it's like that's the thing that I find really challenging.
Yeah, and it's also like you have like the plot points, like that kind of pacing. Like we need to go. We're doing a journey part, like mission, and that's kind of slow. And then we're doing a fighting scene in like a cabin, and that's a little bit faster. So like there's those beats in terms of pacing. But then what you're talking about is like the actual player gameplay pacing in a way. Like, are we going to stand around and talk for a bit, or what are we going to do, or are we going to like go do something? And that's
Sure.
that gets. I'm not too sure how to handle that, because I think if you treat it like combat, it can also help. Like you can say, what is your character doing? Like,
Sure.
are you discussing this right now, or what does XYZ want to do right now? What are your desires? And then go around the room and get a feel for everyone, because I think, and this is like something else I think about now. I'll just explain this other thought, a tangent, is when people are making characters, they go, what is everyone else playing? I'll play something to fill it in, and I absolutely hate that. I think
me too.
play what you want to play, and then you come together. If you have 2 rogues or 3 fighters or whatever, that just changes the feeling of the campaign. If we have our party full of rogues, then it's going to be like Ocean's 11, like that could be, and that's super fun on its own. So like you don't always have to have this balanced party.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, totally, man.
So I think we naturally want to, as like human beings, want to be like accepted into the group, or be like provide something that no one else can. And so when we role play, we do that too. We're like, well, what should we do, like as a group? But I think if you can isolate people, like, what does Adair want? What does Yui want? What do you all want to do, like as individuals? And then like it just get their thoughts, because I think everyone talks about like what we should, what should we have for dinner? You like this, I like this, and you don't actually know. No one gets anything because everyone is a bit too considerate to maybe drive it forward. So like, what food does Gus eat? He eats this, and then it kind of helps everyone establish themselves and think less about the group, because I think it can go a bit faster if everyone was actually a bit more selfish.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, look, it brings so that brings a meta challenge, right? So that can increase pacing, but what it can do is it makes the meta story harder to tie together, right? Do you see what I mean? So like, so as a DM, what you want to do, at least what I want to do, is you've got different characters with different backgrounds, right? You want the story to have something to do with all characters. You don't want to like focus for like 10 sessions on one character to the exclusion of the other 3, right? Like that wouldn't make, like, it's not good for storytelling.
Again, like combat, like everyone gets a turn to kind of
precisely, right? Yeah. So I think like going around the room like it's a combat, because that can, if there's a slow moment in the game, treating it effectively like it's combat in a way could be the way of essentially speeding it up, right?
I had a campaign that I was running with stars with that number, and you get like those, you get like in terms of pacing, you get moment where everyone needs to act now, and we're all kind of progressing towards a quest, and you also get like the downtime aspect where players can just kind of do what they want, and that's also a bit hard, because it's like, okay, cool, I want to go find I don't know, Joey Schmuckles, who's this underground notorious gangster guy, and it's like, okay, cool, you want to go find him, like what does that look like? Okay, cool, it's like a series of roles of investigate, gather information, and okay, like basically this is like a small little mini quest that your character wants to complete. So we can't have that player doing that and hogging the spotlight, because you also want everyone else to have fun. Sure. And I had a similar situation where someone wanted to buy a laptop, someone wanted to go investigate why they were right, someone wanted to go scrounge for parts to make a bomb. And I was like, okay, these are all little side quests that everyone wants to do. And what I just did was I gave everyone like a role or 2. Like, what are you doing? Okay, cool. I want to gather information. Okay, cool. What does that look like? You meet up a crowd, make your role, and like, okay, cool. You have a quick little moment of interacting with this person, and then you're like, okay, cool. You found who you needed to find. Now, next time you will talk to them. And I ask the next person, what are you doing? And then act out their situation, and eventually you come back. So again, like combat, but on a kind of bigger scale.
One aspect I really like about that is as the DM or the GM, you saying to the player, you tell me what that looks like. Like I really like that aspect of it. Like one thing I was thinking about doing with inspiration is you as a player tell me when you think you should get inspiration, and we can discuss it. And
Sure.
as you say, right, if you're going to do lots of little things, like you tell me as a player, what does that look like? What do you need to roll? You tell me, and then we can move it forward.
So,
like I really like the agency.
Yeah, something that I think we forget is that it's a collaborative storytelling session, and we go like, okay, cool. DM told me to do this. My hands are tied. I'm just gonna
no.
play along with it. But
the story evolves because of players and the DM, right? Like you've got a framework, which is the world. That world only gets fleshed out because of the actions of players, basically.
Exactly. And so you got to think about like what is the narrative I want for my character, because I don't think you should play them directly, like as a first person, like they go do this. Like that's a lot of it though. Like that's how we've come to expect it. But you also kind of want this like you want them to impact the world greatly. So like, what does it look like when they, ripped off the shopkeeper or something like that? You got what you wanted, but ultimately, like, that shop could go bankrupt.
Yeah, what are the wider implications, right?
Yeah, and like you get to kind of decide that because you set off this chain like of events if you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's totally fair.
Is in our campaign. I mean, you remember you right at the start, you guys killed that guard. Do you remember that altercation? Like literally right at the start, you had an altercation with guards. Like the implications of that could be like you got a warrant out. People are looking for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like some little thing.
But yeah, a little big thing. But also, so I don't that was a specific instance, but I don't think it's always the DM that needs to come up with those things.
Like I agree.
You as a player can like I was saying to Kelly, because she was talking about like she wanted to be a brewer, and I said like, well, we can like think about like what is your character's goal, and I really liked that she was brewed. And one of the ideas I said like maybe your brew actually is literally the best beer anyone has ever tasted, but the problem is no one wants to taste it. No one wants to. Everyone's a snob and they have their own things, or no one likes a dwarf. Like, I don't want to drink your piss water beer, because you know how snobby people can be about their craft beers and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like, and I think that's a pretty cool plot point, but that requires her having some sort of ownership over the world that's shared with everyone else. And I think that's fine as long as you can drive the story, because there's no difference between that and like having this unknown beer that no one wants to drink anyway. You're still trying to do the same thing, but like, the bigger story is just slightly different.
Yeah, I suppose. Look, the thing is with that as well. So in Adair's case, right? So the player is quite new or relatively new to role playing in general, right? So I suppose that, like, if you're used to playing computer games or board games where you're quite constrained, really, when you think about it, right? You are. There's like a set of very like specific rules and confines. Whereas in a role playing game, you can do whatever the hell you want, really. I mean, you might die, you might get killed, but you can really do whatever the hell you want. Let's be honest, if you want to.
And that's what makes it really fun.
Yeah.
Like for me, I like to explore different things, like even like different sides of myself or something like that. Like I don't know how this emerged, but I feel like Breaker really hates gnomes. Because I think because it had like a few bad interactions with gnomes. Actually, a gnome ripped us off right in the beginning. Sold us like a shit bow, and so like that just got tied into it now. Like he's just like a bit racist towards gnomes, and I think that's like kind of funny.
Because didn't Elias bought a bow, and the bow was like shoddily made or rigged or something, and he tried to use it and it snapped.
Yeah, because the gnome was like, these are some travelers. They won't be back. It doesn't matter, and so like that's just kind of something that emerged out of him. I thought that's kind of funny. Where like I'm not normally someone who's like prejudiced, but I think that's kind of funny to play out.
But again, in game, right? Like that's an emergent thing, right? That's what makes role playing so fun. Is you got these like emergent things that can happen, which are great from a narrative point of view. So like, yeah, like I mean, the thing is with role playing games as well. Like I'm very much, and I've always been like this. Is like if the players don't want to do an adventure or something, then they must just go, I don't want to do this. Is there a job board somewhere?
Yeah,
something like that, or like, I'm gonna go. Is there a blacksmith nearby? Oh yeah, do you need like we're available for work kind of thing, like something random. Like I'm very much if you want to do something like that because you don't want to do the main quest, then just don't feel constrained. Like, just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just go out there.
And I think that's hard, right? For somebody new to role playing, I think that's a really hard thing to get used to just think, well, hang on a second, I can just go do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah, because I don't know, something about having too much freedom is actually scary and like
That's true.
And can be kind of boring. So it's when you have to operate in constraints that makes things interesting.
Yeah, that is true, right? So you still want to have a framework, right?
Yeah, but your constraints are actually they're your characters' like goals. Like that's what you need to operate in. But you gotta figure those things out. Like I read this really interesting article that I'm gonna bastardize because I can't remember how the whole thing went, but it was about knives. Well, that's how they phrased it. So when you create a character, it's about giving your DM knives. Every like floor point or like relationship your character has is a knife that you're creating. And the idea is after your character creation, you give your DM all these knives because the knives are what the DM uses to hurt you. and I think and like those sorts of hooks make the whole experience like really, really fun because it's like it's that looming thread of like, oh my god, I have a family that I don't want to die. I can't risk losing this stuff, and like, and that's very interesting. Like all good movies that we watch are characters operating within limitations and trying to break out of it. So yeah, you got to make those, yeah, you got to have these flaws so that you can grow. Like, why would in the rags to riches case, why would the pauper want to be rich? Like, it solves all their problems. Like, okay, cool. Well, like, what are their problems? Why do they have problems? And like, that puts you in a nice little box.
That goes back to that sort of just like rolling with it aspect as well, right? So if you've got a character where you set up these as the analogy, right, is the knives, and the DM uses a knife and says that X, Y, Z happens, you've got to be able to roll with it, right? Like you can't turn around and say like, oh no, that doesn't happen. Like for example, if you've made a character and as part of the story you get introduced to somebody and the DM says, oh, this is your sister or this is your brother. This is like a trite example, right? And you say, oh no, they aren't. Like that immediately destroys the whole suspension of disbelief is like destroyed, and that goes to like the rolling with the thing, right? You know what I mean? Like just to facilitate storytelling, sometimes you just got to roll with stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that's a trite example.
No, that's true. Yeah. So like I think you're talking about like improv, and like those basics are. I think the like number one rule is that you got to trust whoever you're working with, and number two is you can't say no. Everything needs to build on to the previous thing. So when something new comes up, you say yes, and you add on to what you just said. So like you introduce, here's my brother. I'm like, okay, cool. Oh man, I haven't seen you since you lost your leg. And you had that peg leg. So like then we start making this like really interesting character together.
Teething the peg leg.
Also, yeah, with a pigtail.
Yeah. What?
Also, like you can ask your players to describe what their brother looks like, or when was the last time they saw them, or whatever. And then the player is often forced to kind of draw on some sort of other previous experience or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's all very good points, man. So I suppose in terms of the like what time we're now, like 7:20. You wanna call the stream there? I think we talked about a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but I was actually really enjoying this conversation. I know we're not coming back, so I don't know if you wanna.
I like Breakers. Yeah, no, really good conversation. I really like what you talked about at the start in terms of Breakers, like the way that you use those sort of building blocks to build on Breaker as a character going forward. I think that's actually that's very useful, right? Like that's a genuinely useful thing for character building, both from a player perspective and a DM's perspective, right? So if I'm putting a character together in the world, let's pick some archetypes. Let's say what is their demeanor, and you can work with like an actor or a singer. In your case, a singer, right? So
so your cornerstone of like how you drive them, their demeanor, and like I think something that helped me a lot is visualizing them a lot. Like when we're not role playing, I think about like how would they handle this situation, how would they handle that situation, and then get a feel for who they are really.
almost like a mental simulation, right? When you're out and about doing stuff in the world, like go through little simulation exercises.
Yeah, when you're in the shower, you like visualize yourself having arguments with like people that will never exist in your. It's like instead of doing that, I just like think about these role-playing arguments, like how would they exist in the world, like.
Yeah. Like playing the situations through, right? Like mentally, I think that's it. It is a useful exercise, right? Because I mean, the chances are like if you're thinking about those things in the context of an adventure, which chances are you are anyway, right? If you're thinking about your character, they're going to be useful. Like you're not wasting time thinking about those things. Those are actually useful things to build your character, and that will be used in sessions going forward. So, useful mental exercise, right?
Yeah, it's like sort of like figuring out like what tools do I have with this character, because like it's not getting to the end of the quest isn't as fun as how we got there.
Yeah, man.
And so I got to know like how to move the character's feet, how to kind of push the buttons and make them do different things, or what that looks like.
I think it's going to be interesting, in particular with Breaker, to see where that goes. And I like that you've got that end state defined. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out with the adventures going forward. Because I mean, I'm really enjoying the story. Like I think it's been really fun. Like from my point of view,
That's been great. Awesome. I just love it. Like so, there's some overlap in what needs to happen. So like in our campaign, Mercator the Faceless has assumed control of the Dominion, or just Reperton?
Well, the whole Dominion, yeah, right.
Whole Dominion, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've teamed up with the Hunters to try take him down, right, and restore order.
Mm-hmm.
But to Breaker, this is just an opportunity to take down the Dominion, which isn't actually what what the Hunters want. But like there's some overlap, and like and that's Mercator. So in a way, like it's still quite cool, because it's still a good party and we're doing like the good goal, but my reasons for doing them aren't necessarily good, and so I think that's quite interesting. So I also really would love to see characters or other players try like a rein Breaker in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anyone is feeling up to arguing with me.
But I think as well, like the nice thing with Breaker as a character is he's good for keeping, going back to the pace topic, he's good for keeping pace, right?
Yeah.
Because he's got a lot of forward momentum as a character.
I do like that. Yeah, it's actually also because like the mechanics allow for that. Like he's a barbarian, so there's no real tricks. He does the one trick, which is rage, and a few other things. But when you hang around wizards and stuff like that, they're like, okay, we need to think about it. We need to talk about our spells. We need to do this and this. And it's like, oh, okay, you guys are thinking too hard. And so like I'm playing Breaker in that kind of way. Like, what do? We're just standing around here talking. Let's just go. So I also do hope to like kind of as a player get the other players moving along a bit, because you can become a little bit too academic with what needs to be done.
I think that those academic like chats, interpersonal stuff, going back to the downtime topic, you can handle a lot of that stuff in downtime, right? It's like, okay, you've established a base camp somewhere as a party, you've cleared out, I don't know, a bandit camp. That's now your base of operations. Okay, you've got a little bit of downtime as characters, like a week, so we have a little bit of an in-between adventure stuff, interpersonal stuff, and then you can get that kind of, not admin, but that sort of slower pace stuff out the way, right? And then in the next session, you can go, we're back to questing. Let's move things forward. So there's like time and place, I think, for those sorts of things, right? Like as you said before, it's situational. Like you want to be acting your character. You want to be playing your characters, though, he's actually in that situation, right? If he's in a dangerous situation, you don't want to stand around having a conversation.
Yeah. So just thinking back about that, so like in that situation, we were like fighting those worms, those like burrowing worms and stuff like that. So what do you think would have been? Okay, so it was that main chamber, and then it had that door, and then that other chamber at the top, and the solution to get through that puzzle was in between those two rooms, really.
Basically, yeah.
How do you think it would have changed the pacing if the worms didn't stop coming? Because then we would have been like, because then Breaker would have been occupied, and then we wouldn't have had any time to like sit and talk because there's like basically a fire that needs to be resolved. Like maybe we could just be, there's no combat. Like you can automatically just kind of kill these things, but it meant that someone had to be killing them constantly.
Sure,
and
yeah.
also put pressure on the group to kind of like, we need to get out of here. Yeah.
I was going to gas you.
Thanks.
No, seriously, I've actually got it in the adventure. They're like poison gas, but I thought that would be like really way too harsh.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I was talking about the, you know, like the room where like this, the walls are slowly closing in, and you were just went, you just did a Monty Python foot, like
with a foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seriously, I had it in the adventure, and I thought to myself, "Fuck, that's going to be really harsh after that fight if they're like get fucking gassed."
Yeah, like yeah, I think I might have killed the pacing of it, or it would have just knocked out a few of us. I think Breaker failed it, so would have maybe even like that could have been fine if you just like lost some hit points, because like Breaker didn't even partake in that fight. He was pretty okay, and then that kind of makes everyone a bit worried.
You had that portcullis thing that was closing, while the other characters were getting jumped by those worms.
Yeah, so Breaker was spared. So I think I failed that constitution roll. So like if he got taken out or badly hurt from poison gas, then that could also like put some pressure on like when is the next poison gas attack gonna come. So
it can go either way, right? Like it's one of those things that it can either have the intended effect in terms of like pushing the pace of the story, or it can have the opposite effect in terms of downing a character, and then you got to spend loads of time in a dark room somewhere recuperating. So it's like a fork in the road. But like you say, like if you had something where you have an initial encounter, but after that you can just kill the things automatically, it still creates pressure, but not like genuine danger to stop the adventure in its tracks.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like a manageable pressure, and like maybe they could just keep coming even. So it's like eventually like shit, we need like 2 people to start hitting it. So like okay, cool. So like that slow kind of pressure is, I think, like where interesting stuff starts happening, because then there's no time to like distrust each other. We have to have each other's backs, and that's quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the sessions going forward, and the way that the party interacts. I think that the next session in particular is going to be really interesting, because it's going to, obviously I don't want to give anything away in terms of the storyline, but I think that lateral thinking in terms of you can do anything that you want to do is going to be very important. So that's going to be very important in the next adventure, I think. And we'll see. I mean, like the end of the previous adventure was fast forwarded, just because we were getting to like in real world like time. So we're probably I think we'll pick that up. The next adventure we'll probably do like take that pressure and offload it onto the front of the next adventure, if that makes sense. But
so you're saying like you need to start thinking laterally because you can do whatever you want. So I think you're just describing like there's more than one way to skin a cat, because ultimately because of the way the campaign's set up, like we are trying to get to this one thing, but how we want to get there, what that looks like, is up to us, which is quite interesting. So it's like we're all 4 different characters with our own thoughts, hopes, and dreams, and how do we make that happen?
No, precisely, right. So there's fairly good, well, there is good hooks with all of the characters in the party, but yeah, in terms of lateral problem solving, and as you say, in many ways to skin a cat, it's going to require that. It's going to require that thinking, that planning, I think, going forward. But in terms of the danger of the world, because like we chatted about before, right? In terms of the danger of the world, because we've got a new player, right, or 2 new players, one of which is not an experienced role player. So the last thing I wanted to do was have the world on regular mode, which is super fucking dangerous mode, for a new player, right? So that danger dial is going to get cranked back up to normal as the sessions keep going, to how dangerous it was before. So that's, again, it's going to require that lateral thinking to mitigate the danger. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. And I think it can also help the player grow if you can put them on the spot in some sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, what does your character do? What would you do in this situation? and give like, so then they're not reliant on the group. Also, like maybe, I guess in some ways picking on somebody, asking them first, like and the session, like what do you do first, and then go clockwise or whatever, and then the next session you have like a new person to pick on first. So that way there's like kind of like if you think about it, if it was a TV show, like your character is the protagonist this week around.
Yeah, I like that. I like rotating the first person, because that means that they can't be influenced by the rest of the group. So you enter a situation, right? So you're going along adventuring, and bang, you're in a new situation. It's like, okay, you've got 4 people, A, B, C, or D, right? And this week it's like, okay, I want D person to go first because I don't want them to be influenced by A or B or C.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Person D, what are you doing in the situation? And it's like,
exactly, yeah.
That's you tell me.
Yeah, you're just kind of like the leader for now, and I think it also makes you responsible for your group, and everyone has to react to you, because you also don't want to, you don't want to have like this committee decision making all the time. You want someone to kind of like, I think we should do this, because then like you said, like you influence everyone, and they'll think, okay, cool, fine, let's do that.
It's also back to the pressure argument, right? So it's like, under certain situations you can discuss things, and that's fine. Under a permissive environment, you can have a discussion. But under a non-permissive environment, you need to have a plan of action quickly. Making a decision, even if it's a bad one, is better, much better than not making any decision or just talking about it when you're in a very dangerous, high-pressure situation. So it's trying to, like we talked about earlier, it's trying to push that, right? It's trying to take that aspect and make the party do that specific to the situation.
Yeah, I think the pacing will fix a lot, like even itself out if we can bring everyone into like the now. If you can think about like where you are right now, and to do that is to put pressure on individuals as we go through.
Yeah, man. Like the whole thing of like, I don't like. So if you're trying to do something in the game world, instead of going, oh, how does this work in the rules?
Yeah,
like that's not the question to ask, right?
Yeah, that's how you play a board game.
Yeah, exactly. The thing to do is like, I want to do this thing. Ignore the rules. Like, as a character, I'm going to do this, and then you say, okay, what do I need to do to achieve that? That's it. Like that.
Yeah.
That's as far as the rules discussion goes. And the DM says, roll this dice, roll that dice, whatever, done, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you just remind me of something. I remember role playing once with someone who's also never role played, but they were like a performer. So they were just
like
someone like an actor, and he was needing to fight something. This was years ago. This was like a long time ago. So I'm just gonna try and remember it how I can. And when you have an encounter, you just go, okay, I want to attack this person or this character, and you go, okay, cool. You just roll these dice. But they were so descriptive about everything. The guy was like, cool. I want to do like a somersault and then do a kick. And we were like, no, you just roll the dice. Like back then, like I thought, like, no, that's not how you play the game. You just need to roll these dice. So we made him do like what is it called? Tumble check, and then an attack roll. And he got a natural 20. And I was like, okay, wow, you totally do that. But like, to me, that's actually would be more interesting now. So you say, I want to do an attack. I was like, okay, well, what does your attack look like? Like, okay, cool. I want to like tumble in there and then do this thing. Like, and that's quite fun. So the dice rolls are just sort of like how well you did, or if you can do it or not, but how that looks, that should be up to you, rather than the other way around. Like, can I do this? What do the rules say I can do? It's like, no, just do what you want. The rules will facilitate you doing it.
Exactly. I think that's good, right? And trying to encourage that, I think, is a good thing as well. Like, tell me what that looks like. Just you describe what that looks like. You describe it. Like when you make attacks, like you say, I would like the players to tell me what happens. I don't want to, I'd prefer the player to do it. Like, it makes more sense to me. It's your character. But maybe I'm just lazy.
No, I think it'll be pretty fun if everyone could do that. Or like something I find quite fascinating is if players describe how the magic looks. Because like, I cast a spell. Like, okay, cool. Like, what does it actually look like? Because there's so many like cool like visual effects of how spells could look, like searing light, like, or like exploding bubbles or something like that. Like, describe what it looks like.
And then like, there's the thing with the inspiration points as well. Like, I want I want a player to tell me when they think they should get inspiration as well.
Oh yeah, you
Like, I
said
don't like, oh, I'm going to award this. It's like you tell me when you do something cool,
mm,
and you think that you should get like a point of inspiration. Like, I don't want to award it. I'd rather you tell me. You know what I mean?
yeah. So I think maybe we should just, what that requires maybe is at the end of the session, be like, I think I need to get an inspiration point back. And be like, why? Tell me, what did you do? And I was like, I really like the way, I bullied that gnome. Like, I think only Breaker could have done that, and that was excellent. Or actually, yeah, something like that. Or also, you can say like, inspiration point isn't just to get an advantage of something; it's to get narrative control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's flexible.
Like this little, if my role passes and I've used my inspiration point, like I would like to kind of put more of the situation work in the way I'm describing.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it shouldn't be a fixed thing. I think like it shouldn't just be, oh, you just get advantage. Like, it should be absolutely. Like, I'd be 100% open to that idea. Is more than just an advantage thing. It changes the situation. But like, even things like, I don't know, like degrees of success, like the whole like hard pass fail thing doesn't make much sense to me. So like, if you've got a DC 15 roll, so I've got a DC, like I'm sitting here going, okay, well, I need you to make a Constitution save. I know that the difficulty class is 15, so I know, I'm like, okay, you enter a room and there's like yellowish gas that seeps up from the floor. Roll me a Constitution save, and I know the DC is 15, but I don't like that hard pass or fail. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm very much like a degrees of success or failure kind of guy. Like, if you get a 14, that's probably enough to pretty much succeed, but you won't take full damage, like just a couple of points or something like that. And it's the same thing with like interpersonal skills. If you're negotiating with an NPC or whatever it is, it's not gonna be like a hard fail and a hard pass. Like, I don't like that about the system.
I think what you're doing is actually just, it's like a time, you're like working on a time scale. So like, that single roll is like, okay, cool, I passed the situation, and that way we can just move on out of that scene quicker. But you want to kind of draw it up. But I think you just got to have like your degrees stack up. So like, if I'm trying to get 100 gold coin discount from you, and it requires me to pass this one roll, and I pass, then okay, cool, I'll get the 100 gold pieces discount. But if you want to do degrees of success, like, okay, cool, give me 4 rolls, because it takes like this ongoing bartering. Every time I pass, I get 25 gold off.
Yeah, it's like a skill challenge type thing, right?
Yeah. So like, yeah, so your poison cloud doesn't do full damage every time you fail. It does like partial damage every time you fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's also quite cinematic too. But
yeah, it is.
What's appropriate? What's appropriate to?
Yeah, precisely, right. So it's situational, exactly. So it's like whatever's appropriate for the situation. I think that both are just like tools for the toolbox, but it's useful for ratcheting up tension, right? Going back to that conversation about like, okay, you need to perform a task, but we need to put pressure on the players and ratchet up the tension. A way to do that would be the skill challenge type role for the poison gas, right? Something like that. Like, that's the way.
That gate that we had to open at Portcullis. So it's like, okay, cool, we passed one time. Cool, we can pull up a little bit so someone could crawl underneath it. But that still doesn't help. So it's like, okay, cool, we could keep lifting it up. And that works nice with degrees of success, where if you just had the one roll, it's like, okay, it's just like a garage door, you just roll it up. Or in D&D, I think if you failed, then it's kind of like, what, it broke or something. I don't know. Like, you just can't open it. It's done.
Well, the interesting thing with that particular situation was that first of all, I didn't expect you guys to spot that trap, and you did. But then Dylan's character set it off anyway. Yeah. I was like, oh, fuck, I spotted it. That's going to ruin the whole thing. And then he just set it off. And I was like, okay, well.
We signed up, yeah. I thought about that a little bit, and I was like, shit, like, what would a break have done? I think calling Elias is the right thing, but like, even though Breaker has, I think it's called Uncanny Dodge, as a barbarian, you can just like negate damage from traps and stuff like that if I know that they're there. So I was really tempted to just like roll forward, and then like set it off. But it's also like, that's not how we do things. Like, Elias is the traps guy, and I'm the knuckles, So it's Sting in character. Also,
But what the
something else.
interesting thing about that is you're split then, right?
You
As a
would?
part, well, as your mini group between Elias and Tanagon Breaker, you'd be split if that happened.
Yeah.
So you're then cut off from.
Yeah, I thought that was just going to be a trap to of like a guillotine or arrows or something like that. I didn't think it was going to pose us. Yeah, if we were split, that also would have been quite bad too.
Yeah. Well, it creates it creates a tense situation, right? So, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next adventure, man. I'm very interested to see how you guys as a group of players do in the next session, and basically what you do, because it's always interesting to see like solutions that people come up with. But yeah, man. Look, do you want to perhaps call the stream there? It's like 7:45 my side.
Yeah.
It's probably late. What time is
I
yours?
think I need to make some tea and then we can carry on chatting outside the stream.
Cool, man. Yeah. Well, I suppose thanks people for tuning in and stuff. Hope it was interesting. Again, I really liked Jeff talking about Breaker. Like I thought that was super useful. So I think that's gold dust there. So yeah, thank you very much, dudes.